It's a well-known fact that the enemies in FromSoftware's games are generally harder to beat than most. By and large, though, as long as you're patient and pay attention to each adversary's attack patterns, you'll be able to work out a foolproof plan and walk away from each fight victorious. Notice how he said by and large there? Well, that's because not all SoulsBorne bosses are created equal, and whilst some are fairly simple to beat, others are downright rage-inducing. For today's list, we're looking at the SoulsBorne bosses that have caused more broken controllers than most. We will only be taking our picks from Dark Souls 1 to 3 and Bloodborne, as well as their associated DLCs, because those 4 games have enough wearisome opponents by themselves without adding Elden Ring and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice into the mix. Maybe lists for another day there. Where are the Demon Souls bosses, you may ask? Honestly, we couldn't think of any more infuriating than those from Dark Souls and Bloodborne, so sadly, none have made the cut. Them's just the breaks, I'm afraid. With all of that nice and clear, I'm the vexatiously overpowered Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most frustratingly difficult SoulsBorne bosses. Number 10. Bed of Chaos, Dark Souls. Well, you've got to hand it to Dark Souls, at least the game is kind enough to warn players of what they're up against by giving its bosses fitting names. The Bed of Chaos can be found in Lost Izalith and was created as a result of the Witch of Izalith's attempt at recreating the first flame. When the ritual failed, its power formed a bed of life, and the witch and her daughters were devoured. Unlike most SoulsBorne encounters, where the aim is to slowly chip away at the enemy's health until they keel over and die, when facing the Bed of Chaos, players must target 3 vulnerable nodes: an orb to its left, another to its right, and the chaos bug within its heart. This may sound straightforward, but all the while, players must avoid the sweeping attacks of the bed's branches, and even if they manage to take out one of the orbs, part of the floor will fall away, giving them even less usable space to try to avoid the monstrosity's strikes. Your best bet is to hug the walls as far as possible, but even this isn't foolproof, and so you'll also need a hefty amount of luck on your side if you've any hopes of defeating this particular nightmare. Number 9. Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smo, Dark Souls. You know what's more frustrating than one impossible to beat boss? 2 of them! Indeed, one of Dark Souls' most rage-inducing boss fights pits players against Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smo, or Smog, or Smog, at the same time. This pair can be found in the city of Anor Londo and are assigned to protect the Lord Vessel from intruders. Ornstein is much smaller than his partner, but what he lacks in size, he more than makes up for in speed, attacking players with leaps, thrusts, and bolts of lightning. If he outlasts Smo, he will absorb his corpse, and his already massive attack range will become even greater. Smo, on the other hand, is absolutely enormous and is able to cause devastating damage to the player through use of his sheer size and gigantic hammer. Should Ornstein die first, Smo will absorb him and gain the power of lightning. According to those who have beaten the duo, the best plan of attack is to take down Ornstein so that you're not having to deal with his lightning anymore, and then turning your attention to Smo. Be under no illusions though, this still won't make the fight much easier. Number 8. Burnt Ivory King, Dark Souls 2. They say if you fail to prepare, then you should prepare to fail, and never has that sentiment rung truer than for players attempting to slay the Burnt Ivory King in Dark Souls 2. This slightly singed boy was added to Dark Souls 2 as part of the Crown of the Ivory King DLC, and is the boss of the Old Chaos found by falling through a hole inside of the cathedral. Before the battle even begins, players need to ensure that they have the Ilium Lois Knights ready to go, as they're crucial for closing the portals that keep spitting out burnt knights. The key to victory is beating the burnt knights slowly, as this will give the Ilium Lois chappies the chance to close the portals before the boss spawns. The burnt ivory knight himself is a fairly straightforward melee fighter, and so if you're able to catch him alone, he isn't too troublesome, especially if you're equipped with a weapon that does lightning damage, because he really doesn't like that. Fail to close off all of those portals though, and additional enemies will keep popping out to really ruin your day. Number 7. The Nameless King, Dark Souls 3. We're keeping things somewhat regal for the moment as we turn our attention to the Nameless King of Dark Souls 3 fame. This dragon-slaying god of war, no, not that one, is an optional boss that can be found on Archdragon Peak, and so whilst we have mad respect if you have beaten him, we've got little sympathy for any pain felt during your attempts. You've done this one to yourselves. It's not just the Nameless King himself that must be slain. No, that would be far too easy. First, you must kill his dragon, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, is no mean feat. Standing underneath this great big winged lizard will provide some protection, but you're still going to need your wits about you. Once you're done with a dragon though, the Nameless King should be a doddle, right? Wrong, because once the dragon dies, the king absorbs its power into his sword, and whilst his attacks may not look particularly impressive, they'll hit you like a ton of bricks, so be ready on the dodge button and get those stuns in if you're able. Unless you're a spellcaster, in which case just stand back and hit him with all the magical power you have, you coward, get in there. Number 6. Fume Knight, Dark Souls 2. Here's a fun fact for you. At one time, FromSoftware themselves considered the Fume Knight to be the most difficult boss they'd ever created, and even released statistics that showed that he was able to best players 93% of the time. What that means in practice is that if you fight him 14 times, you'll only beat him once. Who the hell has the patience for that? Right, us, we do, all of us. The Fume Knight, or Rame the Traitor, or Rebel Rame if you want to get alternate names about this, is the final boss of the Crown of the Old Iron King DLC for Dark Souls 2 and can be found at the very bottom of Broom Tower. What makes him such a pain in the ass to beat is the fact that he has such a varied moveset, which is comprised of a whopping 9 different attacks in total. Not only this, but the tells for each of those moves are very subtle, and so it's easy to think he's about to do one thing and it turns out he's actually going to do something entirely different. As though all of that weren't bad enough, he also hits like a truck. Your best bet for beating the Fume Knight? Acquaint yourself with the dodge button. You're going to need it. Number 5. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, Bloodborne. If you were at a fancy party and someone introduced you to Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, you'd probably assume she was some lovely, rich woman with a fondness for tarot cards. Alas, this is Bloodborne we're talking about, and the only tarot cards this lady is drawing are the ones that foretell death, and being the subject of anime waifu aficionados' desires. Ugh. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower is the second to last boss in the Old Hunters DLC, and while she might not look as scary as some of the other eldritch abominations that Bloodborne has to offer, she certainly packs a punch. This vicious miss has a smorgasbord of attacks to choose from, including various slash attacks, a thrust that can only be avoided by sidestepping, and one interesting little maneuver where she stabs herself with her own swords and then it explodes. This gal did not come to play, she came to slay. Now hang on, I can do that one better. You ready? This gal did not come to play. She came to slay. There we are. That's it. That's the one. If you aren't well versed in sidestepping, then you might as well not even bother trying to take down Lady Maria. If you know how to execute an effective dodge, then you'll probably have a slightly easier time, but this fight still isn't exactly a cakewalk. Number 4. Dark Eater Midir, Dark Souls 3. We come now to a boss that's not only difficult to beat, but that is pretty hard to even find in the first place. This optional Dark Souls 3 adversary has tucked himself well out of the way, and in order to track it down, players need to head to the ringed inner wall bonfire, pop down the nearby elevator, and go through the door partway down the shaft. You'll then find 2 statues, and if you attack the one without a sword, a hole will open up that will lead you to the boss fight. This one really is an enemy only for those in the know. Of course, finding Dark Eater Midir isn't the only thing that players struggle with. In fact, compared to actually beating this monstrosity, locating him is a walk in the park. The main reason that Dark Eater Midir is so hard to kill is the fact that he has so much health, and chipping away at it is a real slog. Add into the mix that he has some devastating AoE attacks up his sleeve, and you've got the recipe for one frustrating showdown. Those who have beaten Dark Eater Midir reckon that attacking his hind legs is the way to go, but it's anyone's guess as to whether you will actually be able to deplete his health before the carpal tunnel starts to set in. Number 3. Sister Frida and Father Ariandel, Dark Souls 3. Ah, lovely. A man and a woman of God. Surely there won't be horrible, vicious enemies that are baying for our blood, right? Am I kidding? Just look at the title of this list, Ben, you idiot. Found in the rotting basement of the chapel on the snowy mountain part in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC, this duo of douchebags has caused headaches for a huge number of Dark Souls 3 players. Upon arriving in the chapel basement, players will, initially at least, only have to face Sister Frida. Now, you might be fooled into thinking that this boss is a bit of a pussycat, as she can be bested quite easily. Things are never that simple when it comes to Dark Souls though, and killing Frida will send Father Ariandel into a rage. He resurrects her with new abilities, and now you're stuck facing both of them. On the plus side, they do share a health bar, but you do need to have eyes in the back of your head in order to keep tabs on both of them. Oh, and don't even think about relaxing once you're done with them, because even in death they'll continue to cause you troubles. The pair's ashes then combine to create Black Flame Frida, complete with a full health bar, an additional scythe, and even deadlier attacks. Why don't you just die already, please? Number 2. Ludwig the Accursed, Bloodborne. Bloodborne is not a game that's well known for going easy on its players, and its DLC, The Old Hunters, cranks up the difficulty right from the get-go. The very first boss that players must face in The Old Hunters is Ludwig the Accursed, a monstrous mutated beast that can be found in the underground corpse pile. What a delightful name for a dwelling. The fight itself is split into 2 stages, and Ludwig's attacks differ depending on whether he's in Accursed form, the first stage, or Holy Blade form, the second. In total, he's capable of a whopping 20 different attacks, so players will really need to study if they've got any hopes of taking him down. You're gonna need some help for this fight, and so the best strategy is to summon Henriette and cycle attacks between the 2 of you, as Ludwig will generally only go for whoever has attacked him last. Even with her assistance though, it's a punishing battle, and players will need to carefully time their dodges and attacks in order to come out on top. Eesh, talk about baptism by fire, eh? The Old Hunters? The Old Hunters? Number 1. Orphan of Kos, Bloodborne. The boss from Bloodborne that's arguably the most vexatious of the lot doesn't even appear in the base game, but is instead the final fight in the Old Hunters DLC. Players can find this pallid, lanky lad in the fishing hamlet on the coast, but he isn't exactly a friendly local that'll join you for some fish and chips. For one thing, he looks absolutely disgusting with his ashen skin, claw-like hands, and skeletal physique. Oh, and did I mention that he wields his own placenta like a flail and can break bits off to use as exploding projectiles? Yeah, it's disgusting, it is. The Orphan of Kos is an absolute nightmare to defeat. He's hugely aggressive, wickedly fast, and has the ability to use ranged attacks too. Plus, unlike many Bloodborne bosses, he can use things in the environment to cause players misery. Fighting this guy really is an all-round bad time. According to those who have beaten the Orphan of Kos, the best strategy is to dodge towards him and try and get in some backstabs. Sadly, we don't have any tips for how to get those icky placenta stains off your clothes though. Hopefully when you do kill him, he'll drop some Vanish as a reward. That's a British detergent. You're welcome, Americans.